Welcome back, YouTube, to another episode of DP Broadcast. And today we've got the third part of our NFL Draft Deep Dive series, going through picks 21 through 32, the last teams in this series. Joined by me once again today is Drew Sucoff. So we're going to get into picks 21 through 32. But first, Drew, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. How about you?
I'm great. I'm ready for episode 3. It's been a little while. We had some videos in between, and
Nice.
now we're gonna finish off this series with the NFL Draft Deep Dive, and then we'll finish off our mock draft with picks 21 through 32 at the end of this video. So going into it, first off, right here we have at number 21 the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the cliffhanger that we sort of left off on in the last video was quarterback Ty Simpson from Alabama still being available in our mock draft. So, Drew, for the Steelers, where do you see them going, and do you see Simpson as an option if he's available?
I think it's an option. I also believe, from what I've heard, what I've seen, is that there's going to be one more season of Aaron Rodgers. So I don't think it's going to be as much of a priority for the Steelers as one they have thought at the beginning of the season, depending on like how the season ended, whatever. But it seems like they might be okay with going another year with Rodgers, and Omar Khan has clearly not been the type to be super aggressive with quarterbacks. So obviously it's an option. I'm just not totally sure. And for what it's worth, we haven't heard much of Ty Simpson in the past month or so. So it's still tough to tell. But we do know that he's going to stay in the draft. But it's tough to tell with the Steelers just because Omar Khan hasn't been all too aggressive. And when he has been with his first pick, I mean, he kind of took a similar player to Ty Simpson and Kenny Pickett.
True. Really, yeah. That's exactly right. I'm sure more of the draft talk, especially around Simpson, will sort of ramp up when we get closer to the combine, which is starting in just a few days, which we will have a lot of news, risers, fallers, updates all throughout the NFL combine. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel and following our socials at dp.broadcast to tune into all of those updates. But yeah, for the Steelers at 21, it's interesting because it's Omar Khan's the GM, and in his first season as the GM, his first draft, he sticks and picks at 16 in the draft. Kenny Pickett falls to him and he grabs him, and that was at the time by Steelers fans. I wouldn't say it was a hated on pick. I think that you kept the guy local, just right in their backyard at Pitt.
Right.
And they thought they would be able to develop him into their franchise quarterback. Now, also at the time, I would say that quarterback was a bigger need. I don't think the Steelers really had a starting quarterback on their roster going into that season. And yeah, Rodgers is probably going to return just based on the Mike McCarthy hire. You'd assume that indicates Rodgers returning for at least one more year. But Simpson is definitely a guy that you could see sitting behind a guy like Rodgers for a year. And then starting the year after, or even the year after that. You see that pretty often in the NFL. And just in my last mock draft that I released today, actually, I had Simpson going to the Rams at 13 with the intention to, of course, sit behind Matthew Stafford for a year and then take over for him. So that's definitely an option for the Steelers.
100%. And I think if you're looking at it with just quarterback in mind, at this point, it's probably Ty Simpson, only Ty Simpson. I don't think there's really anywhere else you could look.
Yeah.
And that's kind of similar to where it was with Kenny Pickett. It's like, yeah, it was like Malik Willis was the next guy. And I thought that they were a lot closer, Pickett and Willis. He went in like the 4th round or 5th round or whatever. And that was like the next quarterback to go. But I think that the Steelers can really, go with some other positions here that could really give him help, as you mentioned, a weapon on the outside or a middle of the field game changer with C.J. Allen.
Yeah, Denzel Boston's the guy that I had mocked to the Steelers in my mock draft today, but Omar Cooper Jr., in my opinion, might be a better fit for Pittsburgh, just in terms of where you would play him if you're the Steelers, bringing in Mike McCarthy as your head coach. I just think Omar Cooper is such a smart player and is going to be a very slept on player, a guy that I think is going to go a lot higher than people think. And plugging him right into that Steelers offense with, as you can see, Calvin Austin as a free agent, I think he'd be exactly what you imagined Calvin Austin's ceiling as being. as maybe a guy that's maybe he doesn't have the speed that Austin has, but he's a lot more refined technically, and I think he's a lot smarter and finding holes in the defense.
Yeah, I see Cooper as a super high floor player. I think he's going to
Yeah.
be, I don't necessarily see him as a high end wide receiver 1, but I definitely see him as a middle end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type of guy that can really make a difference. Whatever 5-6 touchdowns on a season maybe. I have a hard time debating who's the better receiver at Indiana. I just am super fond of Surratt, but it seems like GMs really prefer Cooper from what I've heard. For whatever the reason is, but maybe age. I'm not totally sure how they are difference there, but But I like it for the Steelers. I think the Steelers, are the type of team to go for that high floor guy, especially when they have the insane ceiling of DK Metcalf. So I like the fit there.
All right, so moving on to pick 22, we have the Los Angeles Chargers with GM Joe Ortiz hired in 2024, along with head coach Jim Harbaugh. They brought in that new regime, and that has really elevated the way that the Chargers have been playing the past 2 years. I mean, really had that breakout year in Harbaugh's first year as head coach, and they've made the playoffs in both seasons, but another first-round exit, and Justin Herbert still winless in the playoffs. So what do they got to do in order to get Herbert to that ceiling as a Super Bowl contender?
Yeah, and depending on how the draft falls here, I see this as a trade spot if Vega Ioane doesn't make it to them, because I really think this has to be an inside offensive lineman with their first pick. I mean, Mekhi Becton was just absolutely horrible. And I know it's tough with Slater and all ended up being really banged up this season. And Slater didn't play at all, and all was out for most of the season. And it's tough, but that offensive line was just one of the worst in the NFL, if not the worst. And it's just something you really have to look at and say, you know what, if we want a chance, because they were good. They were a good team even with it. And Herbert is a top 10 quarterback, is maybe a top 5 quarterback when you look at it from face value. It's like he has weapons, he has everything, he just doesn't have the protection up there. And I think that's got to be a priority.
Yeah, and the Chargers are in an interesting spot this season for two main reasons, I'd say. The two reasons that I would really point to. First of all, the more obvious one is Jesse Minter leaving and losing your defensive coordinator when you're a team that's just been really building your identity around that defense and around the trenches. It's really tough, and it's going to be a very difficult role to replace if you're the Chargers. And that defense has really been one that Herbert's relied on a lot, at least throughout the regular season in the past couple of years. And it's a team that hasn't been able to get it done in the playoffs, even with that type of a defense.
Right.
So if you're really trying to take that leap, and then the other main reason that I would point to is the offensive line, not just that it's bad, because it is, but you have those two tackles, and it's such an interesting spot because they're probably two of the best players in the league at their position. I mean, Slater, when he's healthy, is arguably the best left tackle in the league. And then Alt on the right side was incredible in his rookie year, one of the top guys in the league. And they just both can't stay on the field. So how do you prepare for a situation like that when you have two of the top guys in the league? It's not a position that you would feel like you need to invest in because you have two great players, but you might need to because they both really are so injury prone.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I like the Caden Proctor idea.
Yeah.
I wish they were, a little bit higher, just not because, but I think if they were able to trade up for Maui Noah, this is just a perfect spot, but it's just not in a situation where that's going to make sense. And for what you were saying with how Herbert was really relying on that defense, I think part of that comes because he doesn't have much time to get many points or whatever.
Yeah.
The wide receivers really stepped up this season. Ladd had a little bit of a down year, but you can still see the talent there. Quentin Johnson had a fantastic year from the previous season. Trey Harris, he's the type of guy that can really elevate an offense. So I think that, the line has to be addressed, whether you're going with a guy who is going to be on the inside like Vega Ioane, or if you're looking at a third tackle who also you can move to the inside and go to the outside with like Caden Proctor. But I think that's got to be the main priority.
Yeah, and that really is the main reason that I list a guy like Proctor, because I think that's an ideal situation for the Chargers. You get a guy that you can plug and play at guard, and then if one of those tackles goes down, then you can swing him out to tackle and maybe develop him there.
Yep.
And then for the Chargers, I really do think that as an organization, I think that they like where their receiving core is at, and I think that they like the weapons that they have. They've invested a lot of draft capital into it with McConkey in the second round just a couple of years ago, and then of course Amarian Hampton in the first round this past year, and then they drafted Quentin Johnston in the first round. They drafted Trey Harris in the second round as well. They've invested a lot of draft capital in some of these weapons, and then Gadsden as well. They drafted last year, and I don't think they're going to invest much more into the receiving room. I think they like where it's at. I think it's a high upside group. And Justin Herbert's really a guy that he can make it work with anybody. You just have to give him time to throw.
Yeah, something we didn't mention, just quickly on the defensive side, is that cornerback room's not the best.
Yeah. Cam Hart really stepped up this year, though.
Yeah, but I don't see him as a future cornerback one, and I also don't see that with Dante Jackson. So if one of those guys fall like a McCoy or like a Delane, but I don't necessarily see that happening, but that's just an idea.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to pick 23, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, another team in an interesting spot. You don't really know what's going to happen with A.J. Brown and his relationship with Nick Sirianni. You'd assume that it's not a situation where you can keep both of those guys on the roster or on the staff for the long term, because that relationship is just not one that you can really build a Super Bowl culture around, which is crazy to say considering they won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. But if they do want to get back there, I do think that changes need to be made. And the Eagles are a team that's drafted just incredibly well. And like Howie Roseman has just put on a masterclass in terms of team building, and that's why they were able to get to the Super Bowl just a couple years ago. So where do you think they need to go here at 23?
Yeah, I think they've invested so much on the defense that it's just not something that they need to necessarily go with just because I think they have a Super Bowl caliber defense. I know, unfortunately. So, and I think that wide receiver is an idea. I love the idea of just going with the best wide receiver, tackle, tight end available. I know Goddard's there, but I think if you get a Kenyon Sadiq, that also really elevates the offense. But I think you got to go with one of those receivers, tackles, tight ends. You take the best one that's there because I think they're a similar level of need.
Yeah, I actually had Sadiq mocked to the Eagles in my recent mock draft. I had the Eagles actually trading up for Sadiq to number 15 overall to grab him, and I do like the idea of that. Even if they don't lose A.J. Brown, it's a guy that he's a very different style player than Dallas Goedert, and I think that he offers a lot more just purely in the receiving game and just an athletic freak. When you talk about Sadiq, I think that'd be a home run pick for the Eagles, and it would be a bit of a luxury pick, but you are trying to improve the offense, and that should be your main focus because you have so many young players on those rookie contracts on the defensive side of the ball that you really trust to sort of step up and develop as players. I mean, you trust your drafting, you trust your GM, and you trust your coaching staff to develop those guys. And then when you look at their impending free agents, they do have some notable guys on the defensive line with Jalen Phillips, and then in the linebacker room with Nakobe Dean, which is one of the more interesting situations on this team, where you drafted Jihad Campbell in the first round last year, and Campbell was only really able to play when Dean was injured. And then when Dean came back, Campbell lost a lot of the time that he was playing, but I think they were much better with Dean. Which is, it's just a hard situation to be in, because in a perfect world you just let Dean walk and have Campbell for the next 3 years at least. But if Dean really makes your team that much better, it's what do you do with Campbell?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to tell just because Campbell really only had limited opportunities.
Yeah.
And I, for one, thought it was a home run pick. I was really annoyed when they got him. And I still think he could be great. I know Nakobe Dean really elevates that offense, but he is also an injury. He's always hurt.
Yeah.
I think he's been hurt every single season he's played so far. And Campbell has not been hurt necessarily, and I think that's somewhere where you can go. And you can take that opportunity and just see what happens this season, because linebacker is also a somewhat replaceable position. And you know what? With Jalen Phillips, they traded for him this year. They were fine before him. They're even better. They're even better with him. But I think it's also a luxury to bring him back. And I just really think that the offense got to be the priority here.
Yeah, it would definitely be a luxury to bring him back, and you'd think in a perfect world you trade for a guy, you want to re-sign him that same year, but he's just going to command so much money, and for a guy that has the injury history that he does, I don't know if that's so worth it to pay him for a team like the Eagles. I just think the Eagles are usually smarter than that from a front office perspective, and I do see them letting him walk and letting another team pay him that type of money.
Yeah, and I'm fine with their pass rush without him.
Yeah. All right. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, another guy that I wanted to mention here. I could absolutely see them taking a shot on him. I don't even know if it's much of a long shot at this point. I do think he's going to be a pretty big riser coming around the combine.
Toledo guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Toledo. And that they go back to the wheelhouse. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Quinyon Mitchell.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to pick 24. Cleveland Browns. Yeah. Second pick here in the first round. We've already talked about their team and what they need to do. I mean, when you talk about the Browns in this draft, it's really receiver or tackle and then receiver or tackle.
Yep.
And that's you go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's just whatever falls. If you take one of the best tackles at what is it, 6 or 4?
6, yeah.
6, yeah. So it depends what happens. I see a world where Maui Noah makes it there. If you really like Fano or something, and then you can go with a Boston or a Concepcion or a Nomar Cooper if there's someone you really like, and vice versa. You take a Carnell Tate, whatever, and then you can take a Caleb Lomo or a Monroe Freeling, who I'm not as familiar with. I know he's definitely a riser lately, but
yeah, Freeling's a guy that I have really liked recently, and I think he's going to be a player that's probably picked earlier than people are expecting as of right now. I also think that Blake Miller is an offensive tackle that a name that people should start to get more familiar with. He's a big guy, and he's a big, strong tackle that was a really solid player at Clemson last year for a team that really fell apart outside of him. So I do think that there's some good options at the tackle spot for the Browns here at 24. And assuming that they wind up going receiver at 6, which has been a really popular pick in mock drafts, whether that's Carnell Tate or Mekhi Lemon or Jordan Tyson. Mekhi Lemon was the guy who we actually picked here at 6 in our mock draft, in our continuous mock draft in this series. So when you're talking about the Browns, it'll probably be one of these offensive tackles when we come around to the mock draft.
I definitely agree.
Yeah, and then Ty Simpson, I did note here as a potential option. I really think that Simpson's going to be gone at this point, because I think that if there's a team that really likes him that's going to take him in the first round, I think they're going to take him before 24.
Yeah, and I don't think the Browns are in the spot to really go for a guy that was going to have him come compete. I think Shador is, for what it's worth, I think he is their guy for the season. Dylan Gabriel showed flashes of being okay. I think you're okay with having them to compete and then worrying about next year's QB draft class, which is very good. Presumably.
Yeah. And the Browns are just a team that clearly hasn't been good recently. Mm-hmm. And that's been in large part due to quarterback play. Yep. So, and if Shador is once again just not the guy, then yeah, you're probably talking about another quarterback at the top of the draft next season for the Browns, because man, they just can't seem to get it right. And for a team that's really had playoff caliber defenses in the past, and the one time they did have a quarterback that actually ended up being good, they did go to the playoffs, and Baker Mayfield won them a playoff game. But of course, they ended up getting rid of him, and now they're back in the situation with no franchise quarterback.
Yeah, it's tough because they haven't really invested that much in it, except for the Deshaun Watson. Not invested that much; they invested a ton. Yeah. But I mean, draft wise, since Baker Mayfield, they haven't spent a super high draft pick on a guy. But I think that's what's going to end up being the case for them soon.
Yeah, I mean, you'd assume that at some point they'll just be at the top of the draft and they'll be able to take one of the quarterbacks.
Yep.
Now at 25, we have the Chicago Bears, who this season had their long-awaited breakout season. Yep. After a very long time that people expected them to finally take that leap as a team. So where do you go here at 25 trying to, and if you're the Bears, the goal at this point is Super Bowl. So where do you go at 25? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean it's so hard just because every single time I'm just like it's got to be the offense, got to be the defense. Like obviously for the Bears, it's got to be the defense, but really the pass defense and the run defense are both problems. When facing the top of the line guys, like you can take an edge rusher and that'll still leave your run to not be the best. You could take a run stuffer and your pass rush might not be the best. So I think you love an idea where you can go the best of both worlds, where you go a guy like Peter Woods who could really do both if that is an option there. And that's the same with Caden McDaniel, who's just like a similar player type. I'm just not as big as a fan of him as I am Peter Woods, but I like the interior idea here. I also don't mind a corner here if they're available. They got Kyler Gordon, Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson, who's really good but can't stay healthy. Kyler Gordon, who also can't stay healthy and has shown flashes but hasn't been awesome. And as you mentioned, McNeil Warren there and Dylan Tiedemann, I guess. But I don't necessarily see him as a day one talent. I think he's going to be a Sunday player for sure. But it all depends on what they do with Jaquan Brisker and Kevin Byard. I see a world where Byard probably goes and Jaquan Brisker probably gets re-signed.
No, I would agree with that. And Brisker is a guy that, if you really want to, he's a guy that raises the floor for the defense, and obviously leading the league in interceptions. That's not a feat that just anyone can do. He is a really good player at the safety position, but
Yeah.
his age does show a lot of the time. And if you're really trying to elevate that ceiling of your defense, you'd invest in a younger, higher upside player instead of just taking the more conservative route and re-signing a guy such as Kevin Byard.
Yeah, and he's getting old. He's getting up there. He's obviously shown that he could be a playoff riser and stuff. And I don't think he's going to command that much money just because of his age. So I see a world where they bring him back and draft a safety in the second, third, fourth round and try to develop him behind Byard. But I think there's just bigger needs, and safety is an easier spot to fill than a legit interior defensive lineman. Same with edges, and the way that the NFL is moving, it's getting to a point where the interior is getting more important than the edges. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the pick here really should be defensive line, and there are some safeties. It's a very solid safety class. Some good safeties that could for sure fall to Chicago on day 2, day 3. But I do think the pick here should be defensive line, especially just considering the guys that you'd imagine are going to be there at 25 in a really just loaded defensive tackle class. I feel like they would easily be able to get their hands on one of these guys, whether that's Lee Hunter, Caden McDonald, or Peter Woods, or just one of the other guys. But yeah, I think that Lee Hunter is probably the best fit here for Chicago. I think that they need really a pure nose who can stuff the run at a high level when you have some guys on the outside at the edge rushing position that are more pass rush first type of guys. I think that investing in a really good run stuffer would be the best case scenario for Chicago. Caden McDonald fits the bill there as well. Not as big as Hunter, but also very, very good in run defense. And then edge is also an option. I list a guy like Akeem Mesidor because I personally think that would be a home run pick for Chicago. I mean, if you're trying to win a Super Bowl this season, I don't know if there's a better player in the draft for you than Akeem Mesidor.
Yeah, it's tough because with Chicago, it's not like they're the oldest of teams. They're still pretty young. They still can look for the future. So you might not just be thinking Super Bowl this year. You might be thinking, yeah, I want a Super Bowl for the next 4 years, the next 5 years. And if you're Mesidor and you get him to 29 years old, then you're already, he's so late on. He's already probably regressing at that point. You don't know what's going to happen. Not to say that Mesidor wouldn't raise the floor, because it absolutely would, and the ceiling. He's a great player. I'm not so fond on him, but I like the fit.
Yeah, and that's going to be the conversation that happens until April, until draft day, because Mesidor is really just a great talent and is going to be 25 years old. So it's a hard guy to judge on where he's going to be selected in the draft. The only other position I could really see Chicago going is offensive tackle, and I do think it's a need, because outside of Darnell Wright, I don't think they have a guy on the other side. I know that the Ozzie Trapalo injury is a lot worse than most people initially thought. And I've seen a lot of tweets that he could end up missing the entirety of next season and might not even be able to come back as the same player. So I do think that offensive tackle could certainly be an option. Also a position that you could fill through free agency. The Bears are a team that has some money to work with in the offseason.
Yeah, I think the Bears are a team to more likely address that, like you said, in free agency, just because you want a guy who's going to raise the floor, and you don't want to have to develop a guy especially an offensive tackle, where they're going to be on there every single play of the game. So,
yeah, for sure. And then moving on to pick 26, we have the Buffalo Bills with general manager Brandon Beane, who a lot of Bills fans did not want back this season, and a lot of NFL fans really just didn't want him back because of the way that he has handled building this roster around Josh Allen. But Drew, what do you think?
yeah, I'm not a fan of Brandon Beane. I mean, at 26 here, I'm very surprised you didn't even throw any wide receivers there.
Yeah.
I think that Joe Brady is the new guy. They believe in him. I'm not necessarily sure I love the hire. Like it's okay just because it's in house, but I don't know if going in house was the move just because you were firing Sean McDermott because sorry, it's getting mixed up with McDonough, the announcer. Jeez.
Yeah.
McDermott, just you're saying that you're firing him just because he had the talent and couldn't get over the hump, and you're staying in house. I'm not sure that was the right way to go about it, but it's tough here. I think weapon is a great option, and edge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's really puzzling, the decision, and it's not to say that Joe Brady's not going to be a good head coach, but the whole idea is that you couldn't get it done with the guys that you had, so you need change. Mm-hmm. And it's just not much of a change when you're promoting your offensive coordinator who already called the plays to head coach.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure that was the right way to go about it. But it's tough because you got to give him a chance, and you know that he was talked about mid season, even towards the end of the season, as a guy that other teams would look at. I know he didn't end up getting those interviews like initially thought, but he's going to be a guy he's from what I've heard of him, and I've liked what I've heard in his interviews. Like Josh Allen really gets behind him, and he has a talented roster to work with Super Bowl aspirations. So they're really going to need to nail this pick.
Yeah, for sure. And just talking about the pick at 26, I do think that CJ Allen is just a dream fit for Buffalo. It's just plug and play there in that Matt Milano spot, who recently it was announced that he's not going to be returning to Buffalo next season. So just replacing him, a player that's been really good for your franchise for so long. CJ Allen, a really rangy linebacker, great athlete, and a sure tackler, a guy who you can plug and play in the middle of the field. I think that he's a great option. And then on the defensive line as well, I think that edge for sure is a position that they could go with TJ Parker and Akeem Mesidor being the guys listed here. They did invest some money in their edge rushers, and that's why I think that really drafting a guy is the way to go, because you're not going to want to pay more money in free agency to the edge rushers. You want to get the guys on the cheap contracts, those 4-year rookie deals in the first round, of course, with the 5th-year option. But defensive line is probably where I'd go here, and then wide receiver definitely an option as well, as you said.
Yeah, and I always hate the idea of just letting a player go and replacing him in the draft, because you never know if he's going to be that good, and it's also not raising the ceiling just because you're losing guys on your roster and you're just replacing him. So it's kind of just like using a pick on re-signing a guy in a way. Yeah. And that first round pick, I just think you got to take a guy with the high ceiling for the Bills in specific, because they keep taking these low floor. I know they did a high ceiling guy last season who we still really don't know what's gonna happen with him. I know he's had some disciplinary issues and whatever, but I like the pick last year, and they addressed the secondary. They have Cole Bishop, who I like. I think he's great out of Utah. And it's tough because they have Deion Walker on the line and they have Ed Oliver. So like the middle of the line, the interior is really set for what it's worth. So I think edge or weapon is a really good spot here.
Yeah, I mean, they have had some swing and misses in the past in the DB room. Cole Bishop, a guy that I think was a very solid pick. He's a good player. But Maxwell Harrison, you don't really know what's going to happen with him. And then Kyrie Elam, of course, a few years back, really didn't work out as the cornerback of the future for the Bills. But moving on to pick 27 here, the San Francisco 49ers are a team that was very injured this year and yet really outperformed what you'd expect from a team with just the degree of injuries that they had going on that team.
Yeah, the Niners were one of my favorite teams this season to watch. I mean, I think Brock Purdy's, I don't know if I can still say this, but I still think he's the most underrated quarterback in the NFL. I mean, he is just, every single time he has the ball in his hands, it's dynamite. And whether you're looking at it from the little white guy and he's like fast, like he's not just like can run, he like moves. And he has a great arm. He has an accuracy. He doesn't have accuracy issues. And it was like, oh, he's just a system quarterback, but he's not. He's a game-changing player. And I think they have a Super Bowl roster. They just have to bolster wherever they possibly can. And I think on the defense, that would be a great opportunity just because it seems like they can't all stay healthy and just try to depth that up. Just try to get a high floor player here. This is a spot where I would like Mesidor because that's kind of where you're hedging your bet with Micah Williams, who got hurt. And if he made it here, I would like a Mesidor pick here. But they just have some great pieces, and I really love the spot they're in.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to put it because Micah Williams is a guy that you're drafting for his upside, but mainly you're drafting for the run defense, and you're not really drafting for the pass rush production because there really wasn't much. Mesidor is a more pure pass rusher and is going to offer you that upside right away. So I do like Mesidor as an option here for the Niners, a guy that we've talked about for the past few teams. But I really liked what you said about Purdy because I do think that he proved his worth this year. And he proved that he's not just a system quarterback because with all of the injuries that they dealt with on the offensive side of the ball, and especially after Purdy went down when Mac Jones came in and played pretty well, people were saying, yeah, I mean, maybe Brock Purdy's not that good, but because Mac Jones was playing well. And then Purdy came back and just really tore it up. And he was just really good for the Niners at the quarterback position. He really elevated the roster and elevated the rest of the team when he came back from injury. So I do think that Purdy is going to be the Niners Super Bowl quarterback if you can put the team around him, but the team around him just has to stay healthy.
Right.
And Brandon Ayuk's going to be cut this offseason. Very certain about that. Ricky Pearsall is a guy that you just wish could stay on the field because you really haven't gotten to see much of him for when he's been healthy. And then Juwan Jennings is the really big one this offseason because he is an impending free agent. He's going to be one of the top paid receivers on the market. So if you're the Niners, are you willing to pay a guy like that much money when you could really replace him here at 27?
Yeah, and that would be another year in a row, or not another year in a row, but another year going first-round receiver. Mm-hmm. I know they had Debo, they got rid of him, and now their receiver room's not looking as strong as when they drafted Ricky Pearsall to be their wide receiver 4. Now he's looking to be their wide receiver 1 right now for next season, and you don't necessarily know. I like Elijah Scratt here. I know you didn't mention him, but Denzel Boston is a great option here too. It's tough. It's just tough getting these receivers because it seems like this power plant thing is a real thing. Like, I don't know if to look in it that much or if it's not a real thing, whatever. But it also seems like the 49ers find these guys and they just perform at wide receiver like Kendrick Bourne last season. And so if you have that situation where you have a system, the Kyle Shanahan system, which is just you just know is always going to produce, and you can find wide receivers that are post type like Kendrick Bourne. You just know that maybe going another receiver that might get hurt is not always the best option.
Yeah, and wide receivers in the draft are one that's really pretty unpredictable. Mm-hmm. And you see it with the Niners here just a couple years back taking Ricky Pearsall in the first round. Up until they announced the name, that was not a guy that was looked at as a surefire first round pick, and they end up going with him in the back end of the first round. So maybe could make a bit of a shocking pick at the receiver position once again this year. A guy that's maybe not as projected to go in the first round as much as some of the other guys like an Omar Cooper Jr. or as you mentioned, Elijah Surratt, guys that could really sneak into the back end of the first round. But the 49ers certainly have positions to address. Offensive tackle I list here because I do think that there's a world where Trent Williams isn't back next season. And more than likely he is, but either way, just grooming the next offensive tackle of the future behind him. And he is one of the best offensive tackles in the league. So not a guy that you want to just move on from, but definitely looking for that offensive tackle of the future. And then safety, a position that they'll need to address as well. Moving on to number 28, we have the Houston Texans, who this past season were a team that really could have represented the AFC in the Super Bowl. And in a year that it really felt like the conference was wide open, the Texans were really just a league average quarterback and offensive line away from being a Super Bowl team. So I mean, obviously, that's what we talk about is the offensive line because that was the main reason that they weren't able to get it done against the Patriots. But what do you think they have to do this offseason, maybe outside of the offensive line in order to improve?
Yeah, I mean, I think CJ Stroud just needs to go to South America and do some Aaron Rodgers psychedelics. I'm not sure because we know he has the talent. We know he has the talent. And I think they got to give my boy Juice Scruggs some work.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about CJ Stroud, it's such an interesting conversation, man, because the guy looked like an all-world quarterback in his rookie year. And since then, it's just been straight regression. And the offensive line's gotten worse, and it's something that you have to note. But how much better could you really expect him to play with how he's playing right now, even if the offensive line gets better?
Yeah, I mean, you always have to at least give him a chance because right now it's tough. It's tough to tell because we know how good he can be, and that was when they had Laramie Tunzel, and I know Ariante Erzuri was okay this season. He was the only like middle spot of that O line. I can't even say bright spot because he wasn't that great, but like he was okay. And Trent Brown's old, and the rest of that offensive line is just dog, whatever. It's not good. You just got to go the best player available, whoever falls, because any spot could be taken on that offensive line. And you ask me what they have to do other than the offensive line, and I think it's nothing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the way that I really grew up and grew into my interest in the NFL draft, your main way that you look at it is you take the best player available. And free agency is for filling holes, and the draft is for taking the best player available. But in this situation, I just don't know if that's really true because I really don't think that there's anywhere else that you can really defend the Texans going here at 28, especially in a spot. Now, if there were no offensive linemen that were good, then of course I wouldn't expect them to take one. But I mean, you look at even just the three guys that I have on this list, you'd assume at least one of them is going to be available. And I don't know if there's another player in this draft that's going to fall to 28 that you can really argue and defend taking over one of these three guys if you're Houston.
Absolutely agree. I just don't see a world where anything else really makes sense. I think that if they take anything other than 7 offensive linemen, there's an issue.
Yeah, I think defensive tackle is the other position that I listed here, just because if for some reason they don't go offensive line, that is the way that I see them going, and the defense is already at an elite level, arguably the best defense in the NFL. There's really not much you need to do to improve, but if you had to nitpick, another good run stuffing defensive tackle could be a good addition. I think Caden McDonald would be a perfect fit there. But yeah, I mean the Texans are a team that's really they're a Super Bowl team in every way except the offensive line, and the quarterback's a big question mark. And Drew, if you're the Texans, are you picking up the 5th-year option?
Yes.
On Stroud?
You have to.
Why do you have to? Why do you think?
Because because you know what he can do, and you know that it's not like he's been the worst quarterback in the league. I think like I was gonna say that if you told me would I rather Bryce Young or CJ Stroud right now, I'd probably say CJ Stroud, but I probably wouldn't at this point, to be honest.
It's really close between those two guys, and
But
not in a good way.
no, but you look at it and like the Panthers are going to pick up Bryce Young's 5th-year option. And that's not
Yeah,
even going to be a debate.
but Bryce Young's improved.
That's
Bryce
true.
Young's only gotten better. CJ Stroud has only gotten worse, and that's the issue that you look at with him. It's how do you willingly pay a guy $40 million for a year, maybe even more than that, when all he's done is got worse.
Yeah, I mean this season was tough. They had the new offensive coordinator,
Yeah.
and the guy went to Miami. I forget his name.
Slowick.
Yeah, he was really good with him for the first year.
Yeah,
and then he really it seemed like Slowick took all the blame for Stroud being bad at first, but then it seemed like he got even worse. So maybe it's a system issue, maybe it's not. The run game hasn't been good enough though, because you need a good run game to have a good pass game, and that's something that's overlooked. I mean, because of that offensive line, they can't block for the run or the pass, and the Texans really haven't had that running back to really change the game. So I think a Jeremiah Love would be awesome. Obviously, it's not an option, but like a really top tier running back, like a Kenneth Walker, if he doesn't get the tag, or Travis Etienne, could really help out this offense. But you got to pick up the 5th-year option, in my opinion. Would you not?
I don't know. It's so difficult. If I'm in the Texans position, I do think you have to. I agree. And logically, you'd say you don't have to, because you just argue that he's not good enough. But you do know what he can do. You took him 2nd overall. That's not a guy that you pass on the 5th-year option. Realistically, put the pieces around him and see what he can do. And pick up the 5th-year option. And if he's not good after that, then don't extend him.
And for what it's worth, if you don't pick up the 5th-year option, he's probably going to go out and make more than the 5th-year option is going to be.
Could make more. Yeah, it all rides on how he plays next season.
Yeah, and do they have to make the decision this
it's offseason? Yeah,
I think they will.
Yeah. All right, moving on from the Texans to pick 29, we have, for the second time here in this draft, the Los Angeles Rams, team that was one win away from another Super Bowl appearance here in this decade, and they're a team that has a quarterback that's certainly getting up there in age, but is the reigning MVP. So where do you go here at 29?
Yeah, it's BPA. Best player available, in my opinion. I just think that they have a great roster. I think maybe defense is a little bit more has more holes than the offense does, but the defense is one of the lowest paid defenses in the league. So, and you have Jared Verse, you have Braden Fisk, who are two guys and Byron Young, who are all on that defensive line, which are really good. I don't know if the defensive line is necessarily something you have to look at. And, I think the secondary would be great if you don't address that with the first pick. I just think that the Rams are in a solid spot where they have the luxury to pretty much go wherever they really feel like it.
Yeah, it's definitely a team that has an issue in the secondary. And I think that's the most glaring hole on the roster. But as you said, it's also a team that was in the NFC Championship this year and does have the luxury to really go wherever they want. And that's why you really look at a spot like an offensive tackle or a quarterback in Ty Simpson, where if you want to invest in a guy, maybe that's not going to start right away, but for the future, here in a first round where you have 2 picks because of a trade that you made last year, then I don't see an issue with that for a team like the Rams. And as you said, they don't spend a lot on the defensive side of the ball, but a lot of that's because they're just good at finding talent. I mean Nate Landman's a guy that they signed on a very cheap deal, and he was one of the best linebackers in all of football this year. And then, as you mentioned, on the defensive line, Jared Verse, Byron Young, Braden Fisk, these guys late first, second round picks. These are not guys that they're going out and investing top capital in. I mean, they're just good at finding talent. And with an organization like the Rams, I trust them to make the right pick here at 29.
Absolutely. I think that if you don't see them going secondary, there's a reason for it. And I think they're going to address it in free agency. Not that taking someone in free agency stops you from grabbing that position, but quarterback's also an option here. I just think that at 29, Ty Simpson's gone.
Yeah, I think that cornerback is realistically the best way to go here, and that's mainly because of the talent at the position, in my opinion. I think that I mean the three guys that I have listed here are guys that I'm gonna have first round grades on all three of them,
Mhm.
and I think that teams should definitely take a shot on them in the first round. Of Colton Hood's the most interesting one to me because I could see him falling to the second round, but Brandon Cisse is a guy that I think for sure is a first round pick, and after the way he's going to perform at the combine, which people might not expect, but he's going to test really well, and I think that he's going to be a major riser. Maybe not even make it to the Rams at 29. And then Avion Terrell is a guy that you know how talented he is.
Yeah,
You've seen the film that he's put on tape this past season. He's a really good player, and I think the Rams would be all over a guy like that
that it out. High floor player.
for sure. Moving on from the Rams to pick 30, we have the Denver Broncos, a team that, I mean, man, if Bo Nix didn't get hurt, we could be talking about a much different end to the season than we did.
Yeah, I'm a big Bo Nix fan. I'm a real Bo Nix believer. I
Yeah.
don't think the injury was bad enough to keep him out at all next season, right?
No, I don't think so.
So yeah, I still think they're one of the best rosters in the AFC, loaded AFC. Um, for what it's worth, and I think that this draft you don't necessarily have to go a specific position. You have a lot of options. The weapons weren't bad this season. Troy Franklin had a great year. I know he fell off towards the end. Cortland Sutton's always going to be a decent wide receiver one because that floor is just so high. He catches everything. His catch radius is unbelievable. And they have some other guys. I know they don't have a great tight end. And if Kenny Sadiq makes it here, which he won't, that will be a home run pick. But I think that the Broncos offense, defense, whatever, that front seven maybe could use some help with Franklin Myers, Singleton, all both being free agents. I'm not sure how much money they have to spend, but there's a lot of options here.
Yeah, it's not much from a financial standpoint for the Broncos. They're not a team that's going to be able to add too much through free agency. So with a team like that and a team that already has a good roster and is going to compete for a Super Bowl next season, you really got to nail the draft. And here at pick 30, I think that getting a difference maker on the offensive side of the ball could certainly be something that elevates your team into a Super Bowl favorite next season. And I think what they're really missing on that offense is a guy that's just more of a model of consistency. Cortland Sutton's a guy that he's a solid player. He'll have some really good games here and there. And he's a good wide receiver one. He can be a wide receiver one. But if you want to be a Super Bowl team, I think you got to get a guy that really elevates the team more than a guy like Cortland Sutton does. And taking a shot on a guy like Casey Concepcion, who does have that type of ceiling, minus really the drop issues, is really what you look at with him. And then Kenyon Sadiq, I mean, with Sean Payton, he's been looking for a guy like Sadiq with Evan Ingram, that signing. That's kind of what they thought Evan Ingram would be, and he of course didn't really work out too well for the Broncos. So yeah, Sadiq would be a home run. Definitely a guy that they would probably have to trade up for if they were to go get him. And then on the interior of the offensive line and the defensive line as well, I think are the other options here. I list Pregnone and then all the defensive tackles.
Yeah, I like the idea of weapon here. Like you mentioned, somebody really didn't mention with a super high ceiling, in my opinion, Zachariah Branch. I think teams are going to have a first round grade on him. I know the size is a little scary, but I believe in him. I think that he could be a real game changer. And I still see the talent in Troy Franklin. So, you'll see what happens. Marvin Mims is still there, who's a similar player to Zachariah Branch. Maybe Branch has a much higher ceiling for sure, but they're in a great spot in my opinion.
Yeah,
Got it. Barron is tough because he hasn't been amazing, but I still believe in him.
No, I mean he's been good. It was his rookie season, and I don't think he was expected to do too much right away in that cornerback room. But yeah, as you mentioned, Zachariah Branch is a guy that I know you like a lot, and he was a really highly touted recruit coming out of high school, and then he just didn't play all too well at USC in Georgia.
Yeah.
He showed flashes of that talent that he showed in high school, but he was never really able to put it all together consistency wise as a receiver. Was more really offered a lot more in as a gadget style guy and as a return man, but I do see the vision and see the ceiling of a guy like Zachariah Branch, who's a former 5-star recruit.
Yeah, if you see pass receivers in the Georgia offense, they not necessarily have shown the most production in college, like Lad McConkey. He was great, but he didn't have the top tier production.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Zachariah Branch should be a similar type, just a product of that system, run heavy, clock control type of system.
At number 31, the Super Bowl runner-up, New England Patriots, who took a massive leap from last season to this season, and I know it didn't end all too well. A little bit of a bad taste in the mouth for quarterback Drake May, who had a near MVP regular season. I mean, missed it by one vote. I mean, they would have Stafford and him would have had to split the MVP if May had gotten one more vote, and that could be looked at a lot differently if that did happen. But now it's just back to the drawing board for May. No MVP, no Super Bowl, and you see what you could do.
Yeah, May is for sure the guy, and I don't think anybody's debating that.
Yeah.
And it's tough with Will Campbell. You know, he did not have a good season at all. And it's not and exactly what everybody thought was the issue. You know, his arms were too short. He couldn't hang up with the guys that were super strong or super fast. And he had success with like the average D lineman because he's an average offensive lineman. He's a high floor guy, but he just can't raise that ceiling. I see a world where they move him in and grab a really big tackle, and Monroe Freeling is a guy like that that's really big. You know, I just think that the holes are super small except for Will Campbell, which is tough to tell, but it's a tough spot.
Yeah, I do think they need a difference maker at the receiver position as well. I don't know if that's something that you're gonna get at pick 31, but I mean it is definitely possible. We've seen receivers go this late in the draft and wind up being some of the best receivers in the NFL. I mean, not too long ago, Jackson Smith and Jigba was an early 20 in the early 20s to the Seahawks, and then Justin Jefferson, also a guy that was early 20s to the Vikings. So here at 31, it's not impossible to grab a superstar receiver, but definitely not as likely. And there's some other positions that I could see them going with. Mesidor, another guy, a guy that we've talked about a lot here in this video. But just in terms of pass rush, if you're going to try to replace Kayvon Chaisson, if you do let him walk this offseason, I think that Mesidor would be the perfect replacement for Chaisson, a guy that offers the same pass rush production that Chaisson gave you this season, and you don't have to pay him the same price.
Yeah, it's also one of those situations where you're just losing a guy and basically re-signing by drafting, but you know, in this situation, maybe it's worth it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Patriots, a team that you could see the upside. I mean, with the head coach and the quarterback, and they certainly have the pieces on the defensive side of the ball as well. It's just, can they put it all together and grow into that Super Bowl team, which they weren't too far from this season. They were just a couple touchdowns away, but the Seahawks were able to pull away late in that game. So that being said, moving on to the last team in this draft at pick 32, we had the Super Bowl champions, Seattle Seahawks.
I trust John Schneider.
Yeah. I mean, if you talk about general managers in the NFL, he's certainly one of the guys that you trust the most. And Schneider's just a guy that's been nailing these picks recently. I mean, just in terms of top end draft picks, you look at all the first round picks listed here on this list. Those are all impact players, like really impact players for their Super Bowl team. Gray Zabel, a guy that is really just undervalued at the guard position, the guard position being undervalued in general, but him specifically, I thought if there was any year for an offensive lineman to win Rookie of the Year, with Gray Zabel and Membu on the Jets and Kelvin Banks on the Saints, I think this would have been the year.
Yeah, they were all really good. Maybe the only hole you can look at on that is that maybe right side of the offensive line, Anthony Bradford's not good. The memes are really funny. I'm surprised he's a Super Bowl champ.
Yeah,
but John Schneider is going to make the right pick, whatever it is. Emmanuel Pregnon would work there to replace Anthony Bradford, but you never know like what's going to happen here. I don't really like not looking into this pick as much as I'm looking into like the Browns picks and stuff, just because it's going to be someone that you're going to be like, oh yeah, he's going to be good.
Yeah, I think my favorite fit here for the Seahawks has got to be Brandon Cisse. And it's a guy that is really going to be in the same mold as Nicky Manwari last year, just at the cornerback position, and a guy that's just going to be a really good athlete. And you get him in Mike McDonald's defense and get him to develop him at that cornerback position, a position where you have multiple free agents, and that's leading into the next conversation for the Seahawks. They do have a bunch of impending free agents this offseason, a bunch of impact players, but they do have the money to re-sign really all of them if you want to, if you're Seattle. And teams that win the Super Bowl don't usually try to run it back with the exact same roster. You want to get some change in there, get some new players, not return every single starter. And in the defensive back room is certainly the place you'd look with Reek Woolen and Josh Jobe both being free agents at the cornerback position, and then Kobe Bryant at safety.
Yeah, and it's funny because you look at the notable pieces, which are two cornerbacks, and they're or not two cornerbacks. Nick Moore is more of a safety, but when Witherspoon's more of a nickel guy. But I don't know if it's really a debate. He's the best nickel guy in the league. He's such a difference maker. I'm such a big Devin Witherspoon fan. Yeah. And yeah, I like the idea of corner here. Brandon Cisse is good. Colton Hood's good. Avion Terrell will definitely raise the floor. And if one of those guys somehow fall like a Delane, or not a Delane, like a McCoy, I'd be scared if he did. He won't fall this far. But just because of that injury, you never know.
Yeah. So some of the guys that I also want to talk about here, just because it's the last pick in the draft, sometimes, or in the first round, sometimes you see some other guys sneak in here. Emmanuel Pregnone's a guy that I think could certainly go in the first round, and that would definitely address a need for the Seahawks at guard. And then both the safeties, McNeil, Warren, and Thieneman would be your Kobe Bryant replacements, where you're trying to get that safety of the future. And then a couple long shots I listed here as guys that I could see kind of sneaking into the first round. Zion Young is definitely a player that I'm looking out for, and he's a guy that could be a massive combine riser. And then Josiah Trotter as well from Missouri is another guy that I think, I mean, he's one of the youngest players in the draft. He's got a very high ceiling, and he's going to test really well at the combine, and another player that I could see rising into first round talks with just how young he is and how well he's played in the past couple seasons.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to go safety here. I think that they still have Julian Leva under contract for next season, right?
Yeah.
He's pretty solid and Manwari. So, but if they do, I trust it.
Yeah. All right. So that concludes the top 32 picks of our NFL Draft Deep Dive series. And now all that is left to do is finish this mock draft here that we had going here. On the left side, you could see the picks that have already been made. I'm not going to list all of them out, but you can also find the full mock draft on the Instagram at dp.broadcast. So moving on to pick 21 here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm going to start us off with Ty Simpson from Alabama.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize he was still there. I don't remember exactly how this panned out. But yeah, if he's there, I see a world.
Yeah, I think that if you're the Steelers, it's too much of a position of need for the future. And you're really looking to grab a real franchise quarterback for a team that really hasn't had one since Big Ben retired. And they've taken some swings on some guys in Kenny Pickett and Justin Fields that haven't worked out. They went the veteran route with Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Get Ty Simpson in there, develop him for a year behind Rodgers, and maybe he can be your quarterback of the future.
Agreed. Can I go to the offensive lineman, please?
You may. Yeah, I'll go to the interior, and I'll list the tackles in there too.
We're going to go Proctor here.
Yeah, I like the Proctor pick because he's again, we just talked about the versatility and a guy that you can start at guard right away, and if one of those tackles gets injured, then you could swing him out to tackle and maybe develop him there as well.
For what it's worth, you don't necessarily see 6'7" guys on the interior that often, but
that is true. But
he is massive.
Yeah, he's a big guy. I do question
speed.
Yeah, if he can keep up with some of the guys
Yeah.
on the outside as a tackle. And I do think that he has a solid floor as a guard, but he's a versatile guy. He's played guard in the past, so I don't think that'd be an issue for him in LA.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, Eagles at 23. I mean, it's a team that you talk about the receiver position if AJ Brown were to be moved, and then outside of that, they don't have many glaring needs
Mm-hmm.
on the defensive side of the ball, but there is one guy still here that's really calling out to me for the Eagles specifically. I'm gonna make sure that there's no other guy here, just not Caleb Banks, that I want to go with. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Akeem Mesidor
Okay.
because and as we said, it's a team that's contending for a Super Bowl right now. And you're gonna have to replace Jalen Phillips, assuming that he doesn't return. And if you want to replace the pass rush production for a team that was really lacking in it outside of Jalen Phillips last season, then I think that's a perfect fit.
Go from one 25-year-old Miami Hurricane to another 25-year-old Miami Hurricane, right?
That's exactly right. Actually, just one of them will be on a rookie contract.
Right. We took Tate here in the at 6.
We took Mekhi Lemon.
Lemon doesn't make much of a difference.
Yeah.
Offensive tackle, please.
Yeah, offensive tackle definitely the spot that I would see them going here.
Can I get a scroll? See if there's anybody I love.
I don't think there's gonna be unless you like one of these Penn State guys.
No, I do really like Isaiah World though, but I'm not going to take him here.
Yeah.
No, go Monroe Freeling. I think he's a high floor guy.
Yeah, I think Freeling certainly could be the pick there for the Browns, a team that's in desperate need of an offensive tackle of the future. There on really on the left side or the right side, Freeling, a guy that has some versatility, but he can be your offensive tackle of the future for sure if you're Cleveland. And then for the Browns here at 25, I'm gonna take Caleb Banks, and I don't think I really need to hesitate much because I think that Banks is gonna end up going a lot higher than this in the draft. And this mock draft did start a few weeks ago with this series, and Banks has been a guy that's really risen up draft boards over the past few weeks. He's just a guy that you fall in love with the traits, and a team at the top of the draft is just going to fall in love with him and think that they can develop him as a player. And getting him on that defense, I think that that'd be a home run for Dennis Allen's defense.
I'd agree with that. I think that's a big difference maker. And I think another guy here that I expect to go much higher, Keldrick Falk, I'm going to go.
Mm-hmm.
I expect him to be closer to the top 10 than the middle of the 20s.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's always guys that fall in the draft. But yeah, Keldrick Falk's a really good player and a guy that is not usually in the archetype of player that I'm really high on, but him specifically, I do really like the upside that he presents. I think he has more upside as a pass rusher than people realize. And obviously, you're getting elite level run defense immediately in the NFL.
And that's a Bills team that could use it.
Yeah, for sure. And then the 49ers at pick 27. I'm going to look in the receiver department here, where I'm really just seeing Omar Cooper.
I do like Chris Bell. It's just that injury's tough.
Yeah, no, I don't think Bell's going to be a guy that sneaks into the first round because of that injury. I could have certainly seen him sneak into the back end of the first round before, but
I was watching that live. That sucked.
Yeah, it's really tough for guys like that. But I do still have pretty high confidence he'll be good. He'll be a pretty good player in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want just younger potential Fred Warner guy, you got CJ Allen right here to line up next to him. Warner dealt with the injury last season, trying to replace the void that Dre Greenlaw left when he signed with the Broncos.
I wouldn't hate that at all.
Yeah, that's really where I'm looking at right now. I think safety could also be an option. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with CJ Allen. Yeah, I think that's a good pick for the Niners, a team that really just needs some stability in there. And receiver is the other position that I really look at. And I did go with Omar Cooper for them in my mock draft recently, actually. So definitely a place I could see them going, but switching it up here a little bit, go with CJ Allen, the linebacker from Georgia.
Mm-hmm. All right, this is a tough one because I think a ton of offensive linemen are gone. So can I see
That
all of
is
them,
true.
please?
Yeah, you've got a lot of offensive linemen here in this this episode of this portion of the mock draft.
All right, we're gonna go Max. Ehana Shore.
Yeah. Ian Antra is a great player, and
Yeah,
he's a
not
guy that really, if you want just a guy that's going to be really good in terms of play strength. It's a hard way to thing to phrase. He's just a strong guy, and he's a guy that's not going to get knocked back. And when you look back at some of the offensive tackles that haven't worked out in recent years in the first round, and a guy like Will Campbell, he's kind of the anti-Will Campbell. He's really the opposite. Maybe he can't move as well as Campbell, but is really just a big guy on the outside that could get beat in terms of the speed rush, but he offers you a lot of upside in terms of strength.
Seems like a very similar pick to Ariana Irizarry last year.
Yeah, they are very similar players, and they're both very good in pass protection and offer you some upside as run blockers as well. All right, the Rams at pick 29. It's got to be best player available here. They went Jermod McCoy at pick 13 here in this mock. So here at 29, I'm going to go with what people may be a little surprised about here. I'm going to go with Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana. And I think
you seem to have been getting very high on him lately.
Yeah, I've watched a lot more of him recently, and what initially when I watched Indiana, the guy that stood out to me was Elijah Surratt, and I still am very high on him, but it is really hard to find a flaw in Cooper's game, and he's not a guy that's gonna show the most flashes. He's not a guy that's gonna put the most superstar receiver film on tape, but he's just a guy that gets it done. And over the middle of the field, he's a really reliable option, great after the catch, very technically refined route runner. And again, it's hard to find a flaw in that guy's game. And getting him on this Rams offense with Devontae Adams, who is getting up there in age, and they could be moving on from him at some point in the next couple of years, whether he retires or moves to another team. But yeah, Omar Cooper Jr. there to the Rams at 29.
Yep. All right. Here at 25, I am between two people here right now.
May I ask who those two people are?
Yeah, Caden McDonald and Zion Young.
Mm-hmm. So you think it's defensive line is for sure a way I can see the Broncos going. I think I look at Lee Hunter here, who's if you're trying to replace John Franklin Myers, who's likely going to walk in free agency, I think a Lee Hunter would be a great fit. Christian Miller as well. And then Zion Young offers you more versatility in terms of can play inside, can play out. So Zion Young could be a good pick here too.
Let me just check out the receivers, see if there's anybody I love. I just don't see Jeremy Bernard sneaking into the first. I'm a big fan of his, but I don't see it. I'm going to go with Caden McDonald here. He just fell so far, and in my opinion, he's probably the best player available, just like GMs wise and just general consensus. I know Peter Woods is great too, but
yeah, and Caden McDonald's a guy that's going to offer you a lot in terms of run defense right away. Has some upside as a pass rusher, but you do question if he could ever get to that production level in terms of sacks. But he will be a solid piece for a defense right away, and a defense that's been really good recently in the Broncos.
Yeah.
So now at 31, we have the New England Patriots, a team that defensive interior is definitely not a need, and that's really three of the top players on the board here. I definitely could see them going in the secondary, but there are some offensive linemen here that I do want to make note of because I mean it's very clearly the big issue if you're New England, and Emmanuel Pregnon's probably the number 2 ranked guy in terms of guards in this draft, and I think that has to be the pick here if you're New England.
Okay. Yeah. I just that is keeping Will Campbell probably on the outside.
Yeah,
but,
I mean you need 2 new guards anyway.
Right.
But
that's true.
Campbell could always move to guard, but I mean the Patriots have really emphasized the fact that they don't plan on moving him to guard. So we'll see what ends up happening there.
Yep. All right. Okay. 32. Can I have all the cornerbacks? I think Pregnon maybe would have been where I was going to go, but
yeah, that's definitely one that I could see for the Seahawks as well.
God, I love.
I don't think you can really go wrong with any of these top 4 guys. I mean, Abney's a solid player. I don't really see him going in the first round, but
if Pons was like 2 inches taller, I think he'd be like a top 15 pick.
Nah, he's got to be more than 2 inches taller and a lot heavier.
What is he, 5'9"?
He's, I think, around that. Yeah.
Yeah, 5'11", maybe 15. 5'11", 185 with that skill set. Maybe he could sneak in, but
Chris Johnson's also a player that I think is really underrated out of San Diego State. Had a great Senior Bowl.
I don't know much about him, to be honest. And no, I'm not gonna have all 3 of the Clemson guys sneak out. Let's go Avion Terrell.
I don't think you really could have gone wrong with any, whether it was Terrell or Colton Hood or Brandon Cisse. But yeah, those were all really good players. Avion Terrell, I'm gonna slide in there at corner, opposite of course Devin Witherspoon. Yeah, I think he offers you a lot of upside at the corner position, and definitely one that the Seahawks need to address considering their free agents at the position.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. Well, that concludes the NFL Draft Deep Dive series, the continuous mock draft, probably the longest mock draft in terms of time that we've ever done. Only took a couple weeks, but that concludes the series. So thank you all for tuning in. Please follow our socials, dp.broadcast on Instagram and Twitter. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Drew, thank you once again for joining me. We're going to have plenty more NFL draft content as well as free agency content. We've got the NFL Combine starting here in just a few days, really getting deep into draft season. So very excited for the content we have upcoming on this channel. And thank you all for tuning in today, and I will see you next time.